right, guys. Hello. Welcome to Semi-Woo.
Hello, it's Heather and Amanda here, and we are so excited to have our friend in the studio.
Yes. This is our first interview ever.
Ever.
I know. Well, on this podcast.
True.
But yeah, thank you guys for being here with us for our very first interview. So on Semi-Woo, of course, it's important for us to talk about woo-woo topics. That is thus the name of our podcast. And today we're going super deep into something that we absolutely love, which is ayahuasca.
And healing through plant medicine.
Healing through plant medicine, ayahuasca, modern-day shamanism, and all that juicy, good, awesome stuff. So we're going to start out just kind of talking with our friend Kate over here. Kate, why don't you just introduce yourself about what you do in this big world?
Let's put the woo-woo in your word.
Yeah.
how I'm woo in the world?
Yes. How do you woo?
How do you show up woo in the world?
So my name's Kate Ryan, born and raised Pacific Northwest wild child. And I am currently a shamanic sound healer with work also in Reiki and yoga and plant spirit medicine and also ayahuasca. I have been initiated into that study as well.
Wonderful.
What does initiated mean in this?
Yeah, what would that
world?
mean?
Initiation is the idea that someone who practices holding space with ayahuasca, so pouring and holding ceremony, it's a very long process of mastering. They'd say a lifetime easily. So there's different levels of practice. So initiation is I've gone down to South America and I've sat with a specific teacher, and that teacher has worked with me to teach me how this specific tribe, Shipibo, in South America and Peru, how they hold ceremony with the sacred plant. And then I have been through an initiation ceremony of my own and been given blessing to hold space.
Wow.
So it's the beginning. It's the beginning
it's
of
the
the
beginning.
process.
It's ties to being like a sommelier.
Yeah.
You know, like you could go your whole life and never know everything about
Right.
wine.
Absolutely.
Something like
For sure.
Yeah. And so many, so on the road, first you're initiated. And then this specific lineage is about curandero. So that's using music, which is kind of like my excitement, my kind of language. So this tribe specifically works with curandero. There's also vegetalismo, which is working specifically with plants and herbology, herbalism, Andean herbalism. And the words and the titles go on and on and on and on.
Sure.
Okay.
I think there's even like a musiquiero, which is I think what the Central Americans call someone who uses music specifically.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can kind of it is like a master's degree. You can find out where your niche is and where you specify, and you figure out what herbal allies you meet plants and go through ceremonies with them and see how they teach.
Just
right?
got woo, y'all.
Real woo. Yeah. And I remember sitting on the other side of a circle, right, listening to this teacher talk about herb allies and plant allies, and I was like, oh yeah, this is great in theory.
Right.
It's great in theory.
That's a good question. So before you went down, let's go back to like before you had ever even like even before you've heard of ayahuasca, or as you were kind of that as we say, like she came into your life.
Yeah.
What was your let's talk like maybe even like a year or so right before that, and what led you to your very first experience with it?
Well, I've always been a performer, so kind of like in the public eye in that way. And I started doing a performance piece with a local Seattle group called St. Janae. And that piece had a lot of ritual and trance movement and music in it. And so we were doing these extended practices for hours and hours.
Wow.
And I was doing things like sitting and speaking mantra without realizing what I was doing energetically.
Okay.
And then there was a part in this play where I would stand up and spin in a circle and sing for like an hour or so. Totally Sufi trance spinning style. And I was having these radical experiences, like almost out of body. And so this was like 2000. 12 and 13 that that started popping open. So mind you, I'd always been like a performer and I've always been a fairy type strange child, like hanging out with the flowers and getting dirty and nature has been my thing, and candles.
It was written in
Yeah.
the stars.
You know, right? Like I was feathers and crystals and things like that. Never really knew.
Some parents are like, we got a hippie on our hands.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Tucked it all away
This
when I
kid's
hit
sleeping with
puberty
sticks.
because it's like not cool,
No, it wasn't
right?
cool.
And then all the girls were into hair and nails.
Yeah.
And,
Oh,
so.
right.
You had to put your geodes away.
Oh yeah,
All
you
of
can't be
it.
a fairy
All
child
of
from
it.
like 13
No,
to 18.
no.
That's when
And
it's
you're
real
weird.
lame.
It's like
Right.
that person is
But
hanging
before
out
that,
with a
it's
bush.
super cool.
Yeah.
And you're making
Yeah.
perfume out of like macerating
And the
flowers
hair
and
and
stuff.
All
stuff.
Oh, I did all of
The
it.
good mud pies.
Braiding
I know.
and-
Yeah.
I know.
Well,
and
guess what, guys? It's cool again, okay?
good. It's good to go back. Yeah.
That's 30. You
It's
get your
in.
geodes back out
Yeah.
and start weaving with
You're like,
flowers.
maybe these
again.
crystals were awesome.
You know, they say that these trends come back in cycles, but I'm like, now that we're grown, we get to choose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
God.
No, I
like
just don't
with all
even
this
care
stuff.
what anyone
I'm like,
thinks
you know
anymore.
what? I
I'm
got
like, yep.
time to care anymore.
have
There's
time.
too many brains.
Yeah.
Too many.
Okay, so
yeah.
you were doing the play and you were
So
kind of
doing
getting
this stuff,
introduced to
right?
that yourself.
Right. And so, and all of a sudden, I'm having those awesome experiences. Well, on top of that, I started finding a decline in my health. So I had thought it was the stress and the extremity, especially artist lifestyles, very
Right.
indulgent and extreme, right? Nothing and everything, and alcohol in between. And so, so my body started to react in this crazy way that for a couple of years I just struggled with it. And then I went to the doctor and they said, "Oh, you have an autoimmune disorder, tinea versicolor." And so what that is IBS.
I have it.
Yeah, a
You
lot
do?
of us
I too
do.
suffer.
A lot of us do. A lot of us do. A lot of us, it
Wow.
lays
Some friends
dormant
have
like
some.
shingles.
Okay.
And then it'll be triggered by something.
Oh.
Yeah, and so it's IBS that turns to Candida,
Right.
and Candida is when the yeast in your body's too high,
Mhm.
and it's not like when we talk about this stuff in nutrition classes, old school, they'd say like, oh, things are at war and imbalance, and there's good versus bad bacteria, and there kind of are, but you need both.
Yeah.
And so the Candida is when you have too much of the bad bacteria to be monitored, and it starts to inflame and push against your intestines, that then our guts are like these amazing spider webs that are all sealed together. So if you have major inflammation in your body and your intestines are inflamed, yeah, you've got this leaky gut
Leaky
syndrome.
gut,
Oh,
girl.
right. Yeah.
And that is the
The worst
autoimmune
sounding
trigger to
syndrome of all
everything.
time.
Yeah.
Like, y'all couldn't call
It's
it
arthritis,
rainbow
it's
time?
fibromyalgia, it's
Oh,
everything.
right,
Yeah.
right,
It's
right.
everything.
It's so linked to
And I'm,
inflammation.
a lot of people are gonna have a lot of opinions on this, and I
Yeah.
support everyone's opinions.
You
so.
guys can just send us a voicemail or an email. We'll talk
let's
to
talk
you
more
later.
about it.
Please troll us about it. later.
Right. So
have
I
an
was
opinion
like
about
cutting everything out of my diet. I cut everything out of my diet. I lived on no eggs, no meat because I don't, no dairy, no nuts, no grains, no corn, no rice.
It's
no
always funny when you hear that.
overripe
You're like,
You're like,
fruits.
what is this?
There's nothing. I was eating greens and
I was like, it's always greens and berries. I'm like,
vegetables.
no one's ever said
Yes.
those are the two things we
Yeah.
decided on.
Yeah.
Like, if you put every diet in the world on a chart,
was
right? What you should and
exhausting.
shouldn't eat. Pretty much greens and berries
Greens
are
and
the
berries.
only
Good to
thing
go.
that every diet says you can have.
Mhm.
That's it. And even some places are like berries have too much sugar. And you're
Right,
like, okay,
reaching out with
I'll
what to
trust you.
do. I started, again, I'm lucky to just have had a yoga practice that was kind of in my back pocket. And then Ayurvedics start being talked about, and
Yeah.
energetics start being talked
Yeah.
about. And
So
then
it came
I
from a place of like trying to heal
Yourself.
yourself.
all the things,
Yeah.
Okay.
right? And then I
Yep.
started learning about the chakras
Yep.
and what all these energetic vortexes in our body have different mantras, right? Belief systems that
Yeah.
kind of build on each other. So all this stuff starts swirling around. And then I had a friend who's like, well, do you know Terrence McKenna and Graham Hancock?
Woo woo.
Right.
Two of
And,
my faves.
like pulling apart the fiber of what we perceive our reality and rewriting our belief system from this inside out. So I started microdosing with psilocybin, and then I had another friend who does combo, and that's that tree frog sap, right? And so, I was just so desperate
Right.
because this thing was starting to eat my body. I was getting these rashes.
oh my
Couldn't you
gosh.
can't sweat. And they tell you, the doctor says, you're going to have it for the rest of your life. And you can either take a pill and work up a vigorous sweat, and it'll kill all the yeast in your body, and you're good until you have another outbreak. Or you can put this topical cream on.
Oh.
And at that point, I was like, I know science right now has has been used to tell me that I should keep putting prescription medicine in and on my body, but I'm gonna say no.
Yeah.
Because it just seems like it was just getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
So so then I had a friend who said, come try combo, and it's amazing. It's a lymphatic flush, an endocrine flush in your whole body. And I saw a remission for a little while, and then it came back, and I was like, well, I just felt not for me to continue in that course. And then that same friend, fabulous other healing sister, I can't wait to introduce you to, Carrie Shampoo. She's just amazing.
Whoa.
That's an
Amazing woman.
adorable name.
You guys know, you guys have ties to Carrie Shampoo.
I know Carrie
You sat
Shampoo.
sat with
She's
her.
friends with my friend
Yes.
Josh.
Yes.
And I cannot believe you're talking about Carrie Shampoo
I know.
right now.
She totally was like, oh
She
my
lives on
God,
the
you know,
island.
well awake.
Woo, woo,
Yes.
Oh my God.
Well,
He
she's
was just
out
in
in
town
West
and told me
Seattle.
about her.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Killing me softly.
She's
Yes.
next. She's on the list.
She might sit with us when we have like meditations.
This is crazy.
Awesome.
I'm so
This
excited.
is what happens in this world.
It is. You just get all
Mhm.
the
Very
way all the
connected.
time.
Right? So she knew somebody who knew somebody and said that there was a shaman coming to town or an ayahuasquero coming to town. And I was like, I can't imagine how. At this time, I was so broke. And so, I have no fucking clue how I'm going to do this. I'm totally unemployed. I'm already in it, paying out. They asked for a teacher training program for this yoga course that I was questioning why the fuck I was doing to begin with, just because other people said I
I've
should.
been in a Pilates course like that myself.
Right?
We've all
Like,
been
you're so
on
good
those
at this, you
courses.
should
We're
do
like,
this.
wait.
Right?
Yeah.
So I have this ceremony that we were sitting on my patio and we were looking out across the street and there's this maple tree and it's like we were talking about the ceremony and in my mind I kept going, there's no fucking way I can afford this. And this tree just kept nodding yes to me. Yes. And I was like, am I fucking talking to a fucking tree? But I'm not going to say it out
I've asked myself
loud.
that a few times.
Right. I was like, even though the woman sitting next to me would totally support my experience,
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not going to say it out loud. I'm just going to whatever. And I shit you not, every day I would go outside, how am I going to do this? And that tree would start nodding at me again. And I was like, all right, you're right. You've sent the call. You've opened the door. I will believe you will support me. And that's one of the first times that I started to feel the medicine.
Okay.
And this is what I talk to a lot of people about. The medicine of ayahuasca is mostly about the integration before and after. Right?
That's so the truth.
It
Right.
really is.
Huge
It's a
messages
huge
the month
truth.
before I
Yeah.
decided to finally go south and and partake. Yeah.
Years
That was
before
one
I
of the
even had
biggest
this
parts.
opportunity, I had a friend of mine who is a total she's like a time traveler, right? It's she'll just travel anywhere, do anything, pick up a life and be anyone. And she
Yeah.
just happened to be here.
It's like those
friends
people
like
that
that.
are
Out of
35
nowhere,
but have
right.
had
They've lived in,
45 lives.
right?
Yeah.
She sat down years before I had this conversation even about taking ayahuasca. She sat down at a bar out of nowhere and was like, oh hey, what's up? How are you doing? And she dropped in, I really want to do ayahuasca. I'm saving all my money right now to go down south. And the old Katie would have these pangs of jealousy. I can't have it. And why do other people get that?
Yeah.
So my first healing experience with ayahuasca was years before I ever sat with her, when this woman showed up out of nowhere, dropped the word, had the conversation, and in mid old school belief system, I felt myself stop. And I said to myself, just because she has it doesn't mean you can't. But what she's done is she's made it a priority, and she's made the room in her life for this to show up.
To receive it.
Right. And I realized I hadn't. And I was like, now, 80 plus some ceremonies later, people are like, I need it in my body to feel. I need to go to this place. I need to experience this thing. And I could say, fuck, I've experienced, in hindsight, she started teaching me years
Right.
Yeah.
before she actually showed up. And I'm still experiencing the lessons.
Oh, that's one of the most beautiful
Right.
parts.
Yeah, that is one of the
Afterwards.
most beautiful parts. I would even dare to say the first month or two after ayahuasca, my first few times, I had no idea really what it meant. No real
Yeah, I journaled
clue.
it down. It sounded kind of crazy.
Yeah, I kind of told people this is what it was, and then no, I mean
Yeah.
it just what those
Yeah.
lessons and the visions and I think that's part of it is that our tiny brains being able to try to comprehend these lessons that we're being given, they go into our body, they go into our spirit, and they come out in beautiful ways, like as seeds. And in a way it's like, okay, seed, like you're cleaned out and then seeds are planted. And sometimes that's weeks, months, years of those growth of those lessons that come out from that. That's the way I describe it. So, and what's funny and what I love about, this is just a little side note about ayahuasca, is that people who, at least in my experience, and maybe you can speak to this too, people who come into ayahuasca with the highest expectations and the highest demands usually get the least.
Yeah.
I mean, they just like, I want to see this. I want to change this. I'm going to heal all of my depression. I'm going to heal, it's just like they come with like a laundry list, like we do as North Americans, as like kind of Western people. We're like, I'm purchasing this, and here's what I expect to get in return. And I have made this trip.
Or they
and
get
here's what I
all the
want.
lessons, not in the way that they were going to tell ayahuasca they wanted them.
Yeah. Oh, you
It'll
can't
be a different way.
Yeah.
She knows
Exactly.
best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can come in with an intention,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, this beautiful plant spirit is going to give you what you need, maybe if you haven't even thought about that's something that you needed.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I
especially
needed
if things
that.
are hidden very
Oh,
very
man.
deeply. For
Yeah,
sure.
very much the medicine is that. It's like you can ask for what you want. We've all heard the genie in the bottle
Sure,
thing.
of
Careful what you
course.
wish for.
I know.
And we think we want it to look the answer to look a certain way,
Right.
or the journey to look a certain way. But it's not. That experience that she gives you, that the medicine gives you, is clearly, in my opinion, a conversation between our higher selves and her about what's needed to achieve something.
Yeah.
And it really can feel like, when you sit in a circle or right before you go into a ceremony, it's almost this, it's either like a dump of like, here's all my past problems. I want to heal this, even though maybe it's something else. Or it is a little bit genie in the bottle. I want, my money. I have this business. It's not taking off. Or I have a love of my life. Like, where's my husband? I've even asked stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, if you wouldn't mind flashing me a picture of my future boyfriend, you know what I mean? And
Right, yeah.
I asked. That was the big thing. My first ceremony was help me heal my body, because that's all the neuroscience we have now and all the articles I could read. I mean, I did it. I tried to Google everything I could before in order to get prepared, and it helped, but not. And I just sat with that intention to help me heal my body. Where do I start with this? What is this? And I had the very classic beginning experience of why I chose to came into this life, how I chose to come into this life, and what was at friction with my belief systems about where I was at and when I was at and who I am. And that was creating friction in my body.
Wow.
So it's this beautiful conversation. It's not that I'm under the theoretical belief at this point that ayahuasca does not technically, literally, physically heal anything. But what she can do, and it's scientifically supported, is help us go back into the traumas that create habitual belief systems that then we now know that our muscles have memories. Our body is a culmination of the experiences around us. So we can rewrite the belief systems which create and invite openings for illness in our bodies, and vice versa.
And that's really what it feels like as it clicks through your body when you first take it. It's going through and assessing what's going on in there.
Right. It's almost systematic and it's almost machine-like.
It can get people frustrated because
like
they're like,
an
I wanted to
MRI.
have an experience. And they're like, I don't feel anything. And I'm like,
Get in your body.
she's intaking you.
Yeah, right.
she's
That's what
figuring out.
That's what it. Yeah, and people describe that a lot of like an intake process, and almost like some people have had visions of it, like my brain, my eyes,
Like
my ears, my
a
something like a
scan or
scan.
feeling.
I've had the mental
Right.
purge where I just all the busy shit stuff that's been in my brain comes out. I've literally heard the Facebook ping messenger and seen the she's just
Wow.
look at all
Feel
the
it
shit you're
dwelling at
so
old
busy
pains
with.
and ankles, knees.
Yeah.
People will feel it in different parts of their body, heart.
Yeah.
Okay, so you go to South America, you learn all this. Your first time there, you come back. What is this like? It's. I thought when I first went down, I was like, please, I don't want to return to New York City selling Nog Chomp on the A train. I don't want to be weird. I was like, I don't want this
what
to
is
make
this gonna
me
turn me
this
into?
shawl-wearing person.
I know.
I wear shawls now, but
Yeah.
There's
It did.
the medicine path right there. It's you
Yeah.
can know what you know, but if you can't serve it to the people, then you're of no use. Right? You can just go crazy knowing all you know, but not being able to come back and be a person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
In the
worries, I think,
Western
for me,
world.
the fears that when I first came back, I was in Ecuador for 12 days, and I'm like, how do I, my ego immediately kicks back in, like, how do I prove this? How do I prove my healing? People are going to expect me to talk quieter. People are, I'm like, can I still be my personality? But even what was funny with me is the number one thing that I would say people are, when I first came back, is like, how did you change? What did you learn? How did you change? And I'm like, I think the way that I changed was that I became like way more fully myself. I didn't change into a different person. And those my lessons were like, accept they always are. Accept yourself, accept yourself, accept yourself. And I'm like, oh, I came here to like become different, become new, become this. And
finally get my life in order.
Yeah, like get it all
organized. All the answers.
Oh man, when you expect
my
to have
closet will
all
never be
the
unorganized again.
So that's like that was explain that. So kind of like how long were you first there, and then kind of coming back to Seattle, or where you came back to?
I was down there for 10 weeks in the jungle.
Now, was that your first time? Was 10? Oh wow, I did not know that.
And were you in like
no
straight
idea.
up jungle hammock in between two trees? They're like
Yeah, almost, but not quite. Definitely not
Catching
a
fish in a
1-star
river.
resort by any means. Absolutely amazing accommodations for living in the jungle. We were flown into this town, Iquitos, and it's river locked. And so you have to take a little plane into it, and that's about 2-hour flight out of Lima. So we were up in the northeast jungle of Peru. And then we drove, depending on the driver, an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on how fucking
crazy they
breakneck.
are.
America and vehicles, honey.
Yeah, drove another couple
dear
hours
God.
out, and then we get dropped off, and then we hiked in about 45 minutes to the camp.
Wow.
And then when we got
With
there,
all your stuff for 10 weeks, which I'm sure is like
yeah,
quite a bit
it's so
of stuff.
funny.
Girl.
One of the ladies who runs it was just like, "That's all you've got," and I was like, "Yeah, girl."
That'd be
I'm
me.
so
So proud.
pissed."
They'd be like,
Yeah, but they have a
Mine
little
would look
cart,
crazy.
a little like tuk-tuk cart style, though you just load your bags on.
okay.
They didn't used to.
Wow.
When they first built out the teaching hospital that I attended, when they first built out, it was just this little path. And it was like up and down and up and out and around these trees, and you just had to walk everything in.
Yeah.
In the last couple of years, they've been able to build out, so they bulldozed like more of a road.
Yeah.
And you can see now when you're walking in, you'll see the earth up and around you as you walk like through a big hill.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, and a lot of the facilitators that still work there attended those early courses. They've got a beautiful retention for people who teach
awesome.
and stay. Yeah.
and it's
very
people
neat.
from all over the world flying. in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, my group of 13 for this 10 weeks was someone from Florida, someone from California, someone from New York, then Vancouver, 2 people from Holland, 2 from South
Holland.
Africa.
A lot of
Always
Holland.
Holland.
Yeah, there's someone from Bali and someone
Yeah.
who's from Colorado but had been living in Thailand. And so they just all flew across the world to
Cool.
meet.
And then 10
yeah.
weeks later, you
We all dispersed.
So 10 weeks. So was this program was
Yeah.
it was obviously like you said it was like a medical hospital, and you guys were learning how to heal yourselves and probably how to heal each other. So that being your first experience, did you notice other people in the group, had they done any other retreats or like shorter programs before they came here, or were some of them brand new as well?
There was one young woman who was totally new to ayahuasca and everything. She'd done a lot of DMT experiences and psilocybin. There were a few people who had very profound spiritual practices, like Buddhist and meditations.
I can get in there.
Really, so much so.
Learning that.
Yeah, there's a kinesthesiologist and a psychotherapist, and most of them all had experience drinking. And most of the course of all the different kinds of people that showed up, I found that the people who are still connected to it in a way that they're practicing is like the herbalist woman and the psychotherapist, right? Is like they have ways to integrate all the information into a practice that's already existing.
And established.
Yeah. Because that's kind of it too, is you go down there, and a lot of us were going down to heal the body because it is this 10-week extreme healing course.
Yeah.
And they're working on a new course now where you can go down and just heal and not learn the tradition
okay.
as well, because
Okay.
it's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A year later, I am absolutely completely healed and free of my
Wow.
tinea versicolor, which I battled for years. I couldn't take a walk in the sun because if I would sweat, I would break out in hives and have to put ice packs on my skin.
Wow.
Like, I
Mine was
lost.
just the color changes.
But the hives kind of thing too.
That's
Like that's
Yeah.
yeah.
And once the tinea shows up in one place, it just grows. So it just
Yeah.
spreads and spreads and spreads. So
Wow.
it was from my face down to my almost my
Oh my
knees.
goodness.
Wow.
It was so exhausting. And so that was kind of like I had done everything I could think
Did it
of.
heal within the 10 weeks or after?
No, it was
Okay.
very much a process. And this is
Got
the
it.
interesting thing about plant medicine is herbalism, natural herbalism, and Andean shamanism with plant medicine. It takes this course that is very different, but is like a parallel to prescription medicine, pharmaceuticals. So they call it like hard jointed and soft jointed. Natural medicine, herbalism is soft jointed. It has a flower, an herb in itself has many different components in it that kind of complement a dosage or an application. Whereas when we pull the specific thing out, like valerian root, Valium, so we pull the thing in valerian root out and use the chemistry to create Valium, then we don't have all the other things about the plant that naturally balance it.
Wow.
Keep it a controlled dose, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what people like about prescription is that it's immediate.
Right.
You feel it immediately. And then also the side effects hide other symptoms that you're having.
Wow.
And in plant medicine, Andean herbalism, and natural herbalism, what we tend to experience is an amplification of our symptoms when an herb is activated, because it's pushing the illness up and out
Wow.
instead of covering it
Yeah.
or masking it and then making the body deal with it. We're actually going to remove it. So a lot of people start a track on herbalism and they'll see a reaction. They'll see an inflammation or all the symptoms kind of pop back up. And it's a good thing. Usually you want to stay with it. Do talk to your herbalist. Do talk to your doctor, and make sure they know what's happening. But it's part of it. And so we call that the death flare. So in my course, I experienced a number of death flares. And so I went in and I've got photos of it, just rashes head to toe. And slowly as the weeks went by, I went through a number of courses of medicine, because you have to do these different levels of things, like different purgatives that scrub the intestines and the belly out, different herbs that go in and rebalance, and then a whole nother set of herbs that go in and rebuild what's going on.
Oh, wow.
Right? So
Amazing.
it's weeks and weeks and weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'd see these, like, all of a sudden last year I was getting tan, and instead of the red spots, it was just white.
Huh.
So I had seen the shift, but I was still getting these like white flaky kind of like patches.
Yeah.
And then when I came back home, they forewarn people, when you're eating this extremely clean diet, like you're barely eating anything down there, and you're also removed from the stress of cell phones and internet and
Sound
people,
and
right?
waves and
A lot of relationships we have in our life make us sick.
Oof.
And so they were like, you're going to have to go back and integrate into your lifestyle, and you need to watch the symptoms and see when the death flares are, to see what's going on around you.
Okay.
And a lot of the work that I was doing, because the tinea versicolor is about the guts, that has a lot to do with the second and the third chakra.
Okay.
So believing in pleasure and joy, creating with pleasure and joy, especially as an artist, you just get squashed, and you just get questioned and criticized.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. And also I'm a people pleaser.
Amen.
And when I left down south, I could not say no. Like, I just couldn't say no. As an artist, you're taught to say yes to everything. And then as a girl, you're taught to be polite and smile.
Right.
Give.
And like, and like if you're good, the good things will come to you, all that kind of shit.
And if you're happy, you should just say yes. Say yes.
Yeah.
Like you'll
Yeah.
figure
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah.
You'll work it out. We'll work it out.
You look
It'll
so
be
much prettier when you
fine.
smile.
Right.
Yeah.
All these things. Yeah.
So I
they'll be
came back
super-
and I was getting
those are
these
deep.
death flares
Mhm.
when I was meeting with specifically other women that were like so nice. Oh my God, so nice. And I was working this like part-time job where I would put this, I'm so nice.
Mm.
And then I'd come home and I'd itch.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, this is it. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And then finally, it was in April that I had this intense, honest moment with a woman that I love and respect. And I felt like she was causing a lot of fucking chaos in her own life and mine. And so I risked the relationship by being honest about it.
Speaking truth, baby.
Right. And I was received with love.
Wow.
I was totally surprised. I've never been that honest with another woman about like something going on and feeling like I wasn't going to get cut off
Yeah.
from it. And that might be a human thing or it might be a female thing. I'm not sure. But just that feeling of like, and she was honest. I felt the craziest shit. I broke out in this enormous rash and I actually pushed things out of my skin. And I thought I was like, I had done something to cross the diet and I'd really screwed up. Since that outbreak in April, I have not seen anything.
Wow.
That's some speaking truth magic.
Right?
Woo.
I'm really sitting with a lot of that now.
Right.
And what happens when we keep our truth inside of us or skew it or
We
deny it
internalize
in place of wanting someone else to feel better or making ourselves uncomfortable with an argument or a conversation.
Yeah.
Or something.
And what
I mean,
good
me
is
and
that
Amanda went
relationship
through
to
a
you if
lot
you
of
can't
that
be
in the
honest?
desert.
Yeah.
And healing
And
our
making
relationship.
and sometimes we always say like, oh, speaking the truth might make someone else uncomfortable. It also makes us uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yeah.
It just like can be. That's why we say like the truth hurts. That's our thing. It's like it heals and heals and heals, and that's very similar to what you're saying. Is like getting it out before it heals. Like it gets worse before it gets better.
It
It's like
totally
that's how
does.
the truth is. It's like
Yeah.
generally it sucks. And it may suck for a while, and it's not all gonna like I think in movies and TV we're like, it's like I finally spoke the truth, and someone's like, all right, like let's work through this, and like within a few minutes they're all back to normal, and you're like, no, that's not how it always works.
Like when we told our
you know?
parents we weren't Christian anymore, like right before that, I was having like mini panic attacks.
Yeah.
It was traumatic.
Yeah.
And then after, not as much fun. Still now,
Yeah,
we're
right.
over it. Feels
Yeah.
great. Felt great to be myself.
Right?
And when I did
Yeah.
it that day, I remember having this high of like,
Yeah.
I did it. It's out there. I can be this person now. Like,
And that's funny that even like relating to this podcast, like when we this is probably like our 8th episode or so, and every time we start talking in all of these conversations, at least me, like I get when we're done and I'm like, whew, like all that's out there. It's all out there, like this is this time in our lives. And I'm 35 years old. And I mean, for some people, obviously, actually a lot of people, this never happens where you're like, I can't, this is like double negative. I can't not be authentic anymore. I can't, I can't hide anything. There's no point.
And why wait until we're retired and on the deathbed to do it?
Is that what we're going to do? Like, I can finally
No.
say who I am. I like how that's like when you're old, your voice gets like
Right.
this.
Yeah.
and you sound like
Right.
this.
Well, but by
Don't
that
for
point,
a
if you've
second
been
not be
hiding your
yourself.
truth, and we saw this, at least at the retreat that Heather and I worked at, is people in the later stages of their life. I mean, God, getting to the bottom of that, it's like as you get older and you start building all these layers of like beliefs and not telling your truth and all these things that build up, right? The older you get, like just the more work it's going to be and the more untangling it's going to be.
Of the people
Do it
around
now.
you,
Yeah.
everything.
So I would see
now.
like there'd be some like 19, 20-year-old people there and everyone else is looking at them like, what? Yeah, the kind of the
Problems
reactions
do
like,
you have?
yeah, right. Like what problems do you have? I'm like, at least they're starting the work now.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Oh,
they're
yeah.
they're like, I know this is work. I know that healing is a lifestyle and it's never done. It's one of those things like our shaman used to say, he's like, healing is, it's a path. It's never done. It's not like I am healed. Like there is not a, and that's not to not give you hope. Of course, like healing is beautiful and it is this unfolding, but as you heal and like something, then you just realize there's more.
Yeah.
There's more people or there's more in the world or
Right.
there's just like more.
And
to
a lot
be
of it
done.
is situations that aren't going to change necessarily, or like you can't expect them to, and working through that. And some of these bigger things of accepting what is and accepting how things in relationships are and things not going this beautiful, perfect way it should have gone is a practice on the daily sometimes that like I go through with certain things in my life of accepting. And I'm like,
Daily.
all right,
A day with my mom is like every 5 minutes.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I just spent 4 days with my family. I was like, help, help, help.
You're like,
in my head, I'm
is
like,
this
help.
ever
I'm like,
gonna
spirit,
be
help,
easy?
help.
Gee, I wonder where I got all these belief systems.
No. Oh, and a friend of mine was talking about this. He's like, there's something about being around your family that it's like these
Your biggest
shortcuts, right? It's
lessons.
like shortcuts to anger.
Quick.
Shortcuts. He's like, they know how to get you real quick. They know, it's like,
Yep.
because they know you deeply, and there's right under the surface of like, oh, hey, we're all seeing each other. Like, great to see you. Right beneath the surface is just
There's
a
an
bunch
atomic
of
button
shit.
in front of everyone with
And-
every person.
And they're waiting
you
with
could-
their finger on it, and
and
you
if
know.
are you gonna press it?
And
Am I
you
gonna
know
press
how to
it?
do it with people, and you can do it quiet. You can be like, oh, it's like that time. It's funny. So just observing that and trying to like still stay in my own like presence
Try to
and
not-
staying
I
in
mean,
my
what
own.
is it, the 4 agreements? The second one was like,
Oh my
don't
goodness.
take things personal. I'm like, ha! Beautiful, beautiful sentiment.
Oh,
That's tough with family.
so hard.
It's all
So
personal.
because they know right where to stick that sword.
But have you ever like transcended? There's been like 2 or 3 times in my life where I didn't take it personal, and you see, and it's like, and then you go right back, and you're like, I won.
Yeah,
It's still hard, but like if you can get to that point where you know that it's about them
I know.
and not about you in these moments, and it doesn't explode, and the atomic war doesn't start,
yeah,
that feels pretty good. This last time around with my family, I was able to do that a few times here and there. Other times I
Right.
pressed my own button and the atomic war started. But like,
I know.
I
It's
know.
so easy.
It's
it
just
just
so
hurts and it's
easy,
annoying.
right?
And when you're in the
when
middle
that
of
button's just sitting there,
and
it is
when
easy.
you're in the middle of an atomic war and you know it, like at this point in my life, I don't want it anymore. I
I
don't
don't
want to go
either.
any few
I
minutes
know.
past this thing, and I just
Yeah. You
No,
know what's funny?
no, no.
I actually, this happened with, it was like Father's Day with my dad and my nephew. My nephew's 24. He's very much in that, like, such, my time of your life.
Basically.
It just
like,
sounds
well, you
basically.
fuck Trump, and fuck, and whatever. And
Anger
it's
Yeah,
funny, he's
baby
actually
with the
a lot.
bathwater. All
Yeah.
of it's out.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I went
Yeah.
to that too. And then you have my dad who's like getting older, and he's kind of like, older white Christian man, so you can, fill in the blanks there. So I was like starting to see this, we were all happy and like chilling and talking about like, I got a cocktail, we're laughing and just having like a normal, like, let's be happy time. And, I start to hear kind of next to me like Trump, Obama, this and that come up. And I'm like, I just turned to them, and without any judgment on it, I was just like, is of all the things that we could be talking about in the whole world, like, is this really right now, like Obama versus Trump? Like, is this those two human beings who you will never meet and have never met? And is this really what we want to be talking about? And both of them were just like, kind of laughing. They're like, no. And I was like,
Cool.
no. I'm like, don't solve it. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be like, well, my opinion. I'm like, I'm not trying to solve this. I'm like, if you say to me, yes, this is absolutely the number one thing I want to be talking about right now, I'll be like, continue. But when you kind of give someone that realization, it's like, no, not really.
Avocados,
Like,
the
I
mail
don't.
system.
Yeah, the
color
food's
red.
good.
I mean, let's go. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes that shift because you start to feel the like you can just see it in people, right? Like when they like my ego and my opinions, like it makes them feel very, very important, and they're like, oh, I have an opinion about this, and you're like, oh, no, that's not. It's not important right now. Like we see each other 3 times a year, if that's lucky, and that's more than most families.
right.
So, and Brendan lives in Toronto. Like we all live in different places, so it's like no one cares.
And it's interesting when you're talking about healing the body, but now we're talking about like relationships, and like I am seeing some of these death flares, like things kind of come to a head where I have to say, so I just had one with my dad, and kind of like your time with your friend, it was beautiful. And I wouldn't say that like it solved our problems forever, and now my dad totally understands who I am and why I do what I do, but we both said our truth and accepted it. And now we move on. It's cool.
That's all you can do.
It's all you're asked to do. There's no, it's perspectives. He has a whole world of his life that is how he frames how I am, and I've got my own that frames how I think he is. But if we accept and we move on and live in peace, like that's like I think that's as much as you can ask for.
There's just so many humans.
There's
too
many.
many humans for any one person to be freaking right.
Or to
I
understand
know.
ourselves in our own
Yeah.
way.
And so
There's
it's
no
like
way.
we have to shift the paradigm. Like I was sharing something and somebody had an opinion about it, and they said their opinion, which I think is just the whole thing is adorable. Their opinion is that the person who wrote the piece was stating their opinion as fact. Right. So like, well, this person's writing and they're saying their opinion is kind of, they're assuming it's fact. And it's like, well, I can totally get to this, right? I've been in that critical writing class and I can like totally stand behind it all. And everyone's got an ego and an opinion about something. But everybody's experience is their own truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if that's this person writing about their perspective and their experience, nobody has a fucking chance to nullify that.
Or
There's
a
no
job
chance.
to
No,
nullify
yeah.
that.
Right? And that's what we
you
keep
can't
doing.
Possibly.
Is we're on the defense. We're at each other all the time about validate why you're saying what you're experiencing. I need you to validate it so that I find it valid. And when we make people validate everything they're doing, it just minimizes.
Yeah.
And so I meet a lot of people that come into ceremonies that, it's hard to get a feel for what truly someone has been through, because people will either minimize their pain to deal with it, or they will inflame it in order to validate their place as a victim.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Something is
We saw
working
that
for them.
huge.
That's a really good observation.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what it is all the time. You really don't.
A lot of the healing that comes up is offering different perspective.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, your mother was hurt and she didn't have a mother to show her how to raise kids properly, and she was doing the best that she could. And then people are like, well,
lenses,
and it's
filters,
like,
filters.
come on.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. I think these medicines open, like just like you were saying, really open up our ability to, like you're saying, with all the junk clearing and everything, is at least in like the San Pedro ceremonies, which is much more. Whereas ayahuasca to me is very internal. It's your own self and your own life. San Pedro connects you to those around you and the perspectives, and it to me it kind of tears off this layer that we have of when someone makes a suggestion, like Heather was saying, like, well, maybe your mom was doing the best she could. She was young and she didn't know, right? Where someone may say it to you and you're like, oh, you didn't know, and you have all this like, whatever, I heard that before.
And she could have done this. She could have done that.
It kind of like gives you this breath to like really consider. It's like consider someone else. Like consider that someone else isn't just doing everything to you and for you and about you.
It's all
like,
about you.
It's not all, even when they're doing
it
it's
better,
not about
but
you.
really, could you? Because like, I can say I could do it better, but give me 45 minutes of traffic and not able to feed myself because I've got a little one who needs to, and then not knowing how to pay the bills on top of maybe there's a fight with my husband, right? How many little things?
Their heartbreaks, their arguments with friends, that they're real people.
My mother's mother and those issues, her
family,
father,
ancestral, and then you
know.
start being like, all right.
Which is like the really fucking cool thing about neuroscience and entheogenics and psychedelics these days is we have so much science to kind of like pair with these things.
I know.
And that's what I really got excited about when I started looking for information before I sat with ayahuasca. So cool that I could Google this stuff.
So much. Even the last
Right?
5 years, I would say, explosion of
Huge.
information and research and money going toward research. Finally, like we're peeling off the
understanding
veil
what's
of the last
going on.
40 years, especially in this country and around the world, against psychedelics and against like they're crazy, they're this, they're
Been
that.
studying this stuff forever anyways.
Yeah. Can you, Kate, from your perspective, can you talk about the difference between a psychedelic and an entheogenic?
Oh, yeah.
And what that means?
So everything used to be clumped together as psychedelics because they create this hallucinogenic experience. But now we're respectfully categorizing some of these plants as entheogenics. And these plants that are entheogenics tend to have a God experience to offer. So the psilocybin, LSD, and DMT are...
Is marijuana
considered-
under that?
I don't think so, but I feel like she's not afraid to become that soon.
She is in my
Because
life.
we've all heard the
She is in my life.
heard and seen the moments where people lose their shit on overdosing with cannabis.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
very, very possible to experience.
And what would be a God experience? Like, what are the kind of like characteristics of that?
Often when someone has the experience that they're talking to the source voice, source feeling, consciousness, often it's experienced as like a love experience, like
feel all the
total
love in the
acceptance.
universe. This is what people say, the connectivity of the universe, time, space, reality.
Yeah, you can either be and experience that or you can witness it.
Yeah.
Sometimes people see deities,
Mhm.
and often people don't see the deities that they would think do, the ones they ascribe to. It's like strange. Like I wasn't raised with a particular faith, but my family was Irish Catholic.
Mhm.
I know that, but I don't care. And I was my first entheogenic experience with they call it a hero's dose when you take psilocybin to an extreme.
Heroic
And, like I
dose.
think I took like
Yes.
6 or 8 grams, something
Oh,
silly or
girl,
stupid.
dang,
I did.
that is some
I didn't know
Terrence
what I was
McKenna level.
doing.
Oh my
And I was sitting in
gosh,
my
I'm proud of
friend's
you.
living room, and I was staring at the poster of the backs from the Pink Floyd, the albums, you know, those women's backs. And the crystal with the rainbow popped open, and there was Kali. And I was like, who the fuck is this badass blue
Wow.
female who's just like
Yeah.
so... She was happy and smiling and, yeah, partying it up. And I was like, what? And it took me years to figure out who that was. I had no idea who
Yeah.
it was.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
it took me
amazing.
like 4 or 5 years to figure out who it was that I'd seen. And I have friends who are not of the Christian faith who one night he did some psilocybin and ended up in a bathtub talking to Jesus all night long.
Mhm.
And he's like, I don't know, I'm not like that.
Yeah.
But beyond that really exciting entheogenic experience, there's that feeling of like not dividedness.
Mhm.
That these
Yeah.
spirit plants connect us to
Right.
the earth, to the space around us.
I would say that's almost the number one. If you had to kind of do a study, you know, of anyone who has ever had an experience with a psychedelic or an entheogenic, and you would say, like, if you had to say, like, the number one lesson, right? If you, nothing else, what would it be? And I feel like it would probably be connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Just of
To
human
others,
beings, nature, and, you know, trying to, it's just one of those things, like, you can't explain it to someone, because you could be like, yeah, we're connected, we get it, like, we all, whatever. But, like, the much,
on
much
a deep
deeper level.
level.
Yeah.
And a lot of the cliches start making sense, like we are love, we are made of love, we
Yeah.
are one. These things are
Mhm.
kind of shown, or you have these knowings
It's
or
a
this
much deeper
insight about
experience.
how big and beautiful that is, and it really is love, and it's unconditional. That for me, with my last LSD journey, this feeling of unconditional love, that I can still tap in and remember what it's like, even if I don't feel it like that, like loving things from like rape and murder to glory and winning and family and connection, and seeing it all and going like, this is all that is, and I love it as this part and parcel, which is very hard to explain and understand when you're not with these plant spirits or
Right. I feel like I've only really heard other people say it as like a mother's love when they talk about their children who become
makes
criminals or
sense.
murderers
Right.
and things, like still love them
Yes.
no matter what someone does. And that's I feel like is the love that Kali, that goddess, right? Is this
So
like
she like popped up, and that's Jesus too.
it's Jesus
I
too,
know.
right?
Like,
Is not
absolutely.
afraid to give the life,
like
or
the
take
teachers
the
that
sacrifice
show us
and-
those things.
And generally, they are loving people that society found unloved. I mean,
Yeah.
like that, we tend to forget that in modern
Why
Jesus.
is
but,
it
like,
the underdog
he
is such a
was-
hero's journey?
Yeah, for sure. Well, guys, we are going to take a little break, and for you guys, that will be nothing. So if you can take a sip of water in 2 seconds, we will be back in 2 seconds.
Thank you. This has been
Thanks.
awesome. Thank you, Kate.
Oh, thank you.
All right, guys, we're back. Thank you for joining us again for this next section here with the beautiful Kate Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking
Beautiful fairy.
ayahuasca, plant medicine healing, and all that. We wanted to actually
Yeah, a little bit
share
of
some
everything.
stories.
We do, yeah.
A
Generally,
lot
yeah,
of
when-
people ask us, like, what was it like? What did you go through? Did anything
Yeah.
crazy happen? And the answer is yes.
Right. That's always the question.
Yeah.
right?
And it
Did
was
you get that a lot?
amazing.
Like,
Yes,
people,
it was
they want to
amazing.
hear, because a lot of the stuff we watch on YouTube and when you Google and you start getting into ayahuasca, at least me, it was like, when I first was looking at all these videos and documentaries, I was like, oh, this isn't for me, but like, it's a crazy, and they're in the jungle and they're throwing up and they're scary and there's demons and
Yeah.
everything, right? And
It's kind of like
yeah.
a Yelp review. Like, you have to take into consideration of all the hundreds of people that are having these experiences that at some point this person is going to choose to sit down and write theirs.
Yeah.
So you have to like kind of take into consideration who writes what.
Right.
And that
Right.
it is like a very...
And it's usually the people with the crazier
right.
stories.
Like
that
I've
you
had
hear
some
those.
80 some or plus more, and I haven't bothered to write anything about it.
Yeah.
But I'll talk about it. But
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, like,
Yeah. And it's so
a
personal.
lot of people freak out about the pooping and the barfing. I'm like, well, you drink a bunch of alcohol and you barf it out
Yeah.
and you're
That is
barfing out poison.
And if you
and then all of a
really
sudden it weirds
embrace
people
it
out.
like medicine,
Yes.
then, like, I mean, of course, 10 weeks was a very long, long time. But after about a week or so, it's like somebody would vomit or purge, bottom purge, we call it, likely. You know, you start cheering for them because
Oh,
you know they're
right away.
moving something
Right,
out.
yeah,
And
they're
you
getting
do
feeling
rid of.
something for the
Yeah.
space. And you feel it when somebody
feel
is
it.
having a tough time letting go of something or they can't quite purge, they'll dry heave, and then they do it. Our shaman would be like, aho!
Yeah, right?
You know, and you're
Yay,
like,
good
yay, and you
job.
feel this release of tension in the
Lightness.
circle.
Yeah.
I know.
And a lightness, and it feels, and when you do it personally, it's beautiful. And you, sometimes you know it's coming up, sometimes you don't, but this, they don't turn around and look in the bowl of shit and dig around and try to feel
Right.
what's coming out. You know something came
Dump
out,
it.
move
Just
on.
let it,
Just
yeah.
let it go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, you
The-
can be physical or emotional. It can be
Right.
it's so many different types of purging.
The different types, the different types of purges, you know, emotional, people
Burping
cry or
even.
scream, lots of burping, gas.
The,
of all
the
kinds.
craziest
Yawning.
one for me.
I would get
yawning,
yawns a lot.
Huge, big,
to
vibrational
where you couldn't
yawning.
even get it.
And you
was
feel like at the end you're like blow out the end of the yawn.
Yeah, some people would.
One of the toughest ones for me to sit through was these intense cold. No blanket, no heat, no nothing could heal this cold before it had its time coming out of my bones.
Yeah.
Deep Siberian winter cold.
And we'd have people, when we were a helper, would ask for, they'd have like 8 blankets on them, and they'd ask for more blankets, more blankets, more blankets.
And the shaman would be like, no, let that cold out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take those blankets off. Because,
Cold
we
to
were in
sickness.
Ecuador in the jungle. Like, it wasn't the environment.
No, yeah, it definitely wasn't cold. So to see that, I mean, when people first talk about ayahuasca, it's always one of the first questions. But wait, so and I see this online and on everywhere. People I think it's the funniest, sassiest comment. They're like, "Oh, you're gonna spend thousands of dollars and go all the way to the jungle just to throw up in a bucket? Gross." And you're like, "Do you really think that's what people are doing?" Like,
Yeah.
"Oh,
That's
yeah,
a beautiful way to
I spend thousands of dollars
spend it
at
into a
bars,
tiny moment.
throwing up into toilets. I mean, you've done
Yeah.
it. We've all
Yeah.
done it.
I
You know
know."
what I mean?
How much did that detox cost
How much
you?
did your,
Right.
your
Right.
alcohol retreat?
How much did that
last
colon
How much
night?
have you
cost
spent on
you?
alcohol
How much-
in your
right.
life? I wouldn't even want to know the answer to that
Right.
question.
And
Honestly.
the way
That's
I
the
play it
thing.
so fast and loose with street meats when I travel, it's like,
Yeah.
ain't nobody got any business being weird about barfing and
Right.
pooping.
You want to eat
It's
it up
more
off the
just that
floor.
what people don't necessarily understand. And I think when I first was like learning about purging with ayahuasca, I thought it was like, okay, you drink ayahuasca and that's just a natural side effect, right? I was like, the purging is just kind of like, it's something that happens with ayahuasca. But no, like it is a huge part of the process, and it's a huge learning around it. And I mean, the most interesting thing to me that would happen is I would see people who were purging, like vomiting into their buckets for what seemed like 10 minutes, and you go over to help them and there's nothing in it, you know, and it was
Just
just
energy.
all energy. And it's like, it's beautiful to see all these different ways. And as the helpers, you know, we were like, when we worked at the retreats, the helpers were like emptying the buckets, which God be honest, took me like 3 or 4 ceremonies before I was able to do that. Like that is not an
Yeah.
easy thing to do.
But when you do it and you sit in at a ceremony and you're taking buckets and emptying them, it's one of the most beautiful things
I
I've
know.
ever done.
Yeah.
And,
And
you
everyone
don't
wanted to
have this
volunteer. to do that.
Facilitating
we
deep
all
healing.
really
Deep.
wanted to be
And you
there.
know people's stories, so when you see that, you're like, yeah, this
Yay.
person or that person, or
Right.
you know, yeah, it's like watching them let go.
Yeah.
So we were gonna too, because we always get this question as people want to be like, tell me a story, or you know, did like so Heather said, did anything crazy happen? And yes, of course, absolutely, things crazy happened. And the thing I always tell people about any of these medicines, especially the stronger ones like ayahuasca and San Pedro, is that it took me having personal experience to believe these things that I now believe in. So anything that I talk about is like, I believe it because I saw it, and I had to see it from my own with my own eyes. Because if someone would have told me this story before I went, I was like, "You're crazy," and you're
Sounds
making
like
stuff
fairy
up.
tales.
Sounds like fairy tales.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't care anymore to make anyone believe
Or
it.
it sounds
Yeah.
I
like
was
one-offs, and then
Yeah.
you see enough
Yeah.
this healing, and you're like, well, now I got
The
it.
hard thing with these is like I just like drop a little neuroscience before we get too far in the fun side of it. Is that right? We're all different. We're all unique. We all have these different experiences. No one is alike, and we know that there are things that happen in the brain. There's a chemical reaction with the Banistericapi, the ayahuasca vine, that it if you drink it, you might have one of 3 experiences. So it's normal to experience nothing. Totally
Yep.
normal. That what is going to happen in your brain will still happen even though your body feels that way. A secondary experience out of the 3 possible is to have a realization. We call it like this secondary epiphany, right? To have, for example, maybe you decide not to eat a product of some kind. You're like, holy fuck, why am I eating that? I don't ever want to do that again. I see what's happening to my body. I see where it's coming from. But then this secondary epiphany is generally what most people experience. Like there's an epiphany, and then you have to go back and integrate it. You have to go back into your walking life and go, okay, now I'm going to choose not to put that in my mouth. I'm going to choose to do something different than that. I'm going to also choose to become more aware of it and start to make choices that support it. Another smaller possibility is a cathartic healing, which some people do, but it's not something to reach for. It's not always pleasant. It's like an extreme knowingness. And all these 3 things can happen. And any of these 3 things could happen in conjunction to each other, with or without, no matter whether these things are happening or not. What will happen if you drink ayahuasca is that your prefrontal cortex will shift from alpha into theta. So you will go into a lucid dream state in your brain. Then it opens up the amygdala, which holds all of our trauma, and especially the place from 0 to 7 where you have like major belief systems written. And then the third place that's activated in your brain is the hippocampus. And that's where we take all of the experiences around us and the emotions and we create opinions out of them. So whether you're having a touch by God healing, a small epiphany, or you're just sweating and tired and not feeling anything, these things will be happening in your brain. You will be in a theta mode. The traumas will be opening up in your subconscious, and you will be taking a non-opinionated position to observing all that you have woven together in your hippocampus. And this, what's the word I like to use? It's basically this objective. You get this amazing objective perspective on why it all happened, how it all happened, and what happened. And I think that's what we call the God experience. And so even if you're just cold, like sometimes I would black out. Sometimes I would ask really big questions in my ceremonies, and Spirit says, well, we don't want to re-traumatize you with what's going on, and it's not necessary, so you're just going to black out. And I would wake up in a puddle of sweat. And it's like a cold, rainy night, so there's no reason why I should be sweating.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's a beautiful thing. I think a lot of people take ayahuasca and they're like, oh, it's going to drag me through my worst fears. Or like, maybe I was like touched as a kid and I don't remember, and then I'm going to have to see all this stuff. Or maybe like a lot of us really believe that like a lot of worse things happen to us, or that this medicine's there to like show us what's true and like get to the meat of it.
And we're going to have to see it all again.
See it, live it again, and like these monsters and things like that. And there are tough moments, but you really do get a sense of the Spirit that like she's there to help.
Yeah. It's
you
all
can
to understand.
You have the power and the ability to walk through it. And if you didn't, maybe you black out. Maybe you go through the healing in a way of purging, cold, yawning, laughter, such a big one too.
That plant medicine up and out. It's going to come up and out.
And sometimes it's fast. Sometimes you don't see it. Sometimes you walk it.
And so we're also different in our energetic too, right? There's like 13 different ways now that they've found people gather information and learn. Some are kinesthetic, touching other people. Some are sound. Some are speech. Some are spatial awareness or numbers and patterns. And so we do all of these things, and we do them all differently in our own way. And so to sit down in a medicine like this huge spirit medicine for trauma healing and like pattern belief and rewiring, it's sitting down with your truest self.
Yeah.
And you get a big mirror put in front of you. And you get to, I tell people, you don't have to go down and guru these shamans. They are human beings.
Yep, very much so, in living with
human
them.
being healers.
They got kids.
Yeah.
They go out to restaurants.
Yes, they do. They have pasts
have their
and
own-
futures
yeah.
and
They have their own
families.
stuff.
Some of them are angry. Some haven't learned certain lessons. Some are, they're just
On
very
their
much
own
real
path.
people.
Yes.
And so it's we have to do our due diligence to do the work, to be ready to integrate, this kind of experience, like with this information, we're also understanding with the neuroscience, we can very lovingly take this ayahuasca experience out of just a fun, like, tourist thing that we used to kind of say, hey, these people are going down and experiencing this crazy thing. And we can really see that people are creating spiritual movements out of this. They're shifting their lives.
Yeah.
And so,
Weird.
but it's something we're
Semi-real.
not used to seeing. So it can look crazy and intense.
Exactly. It can look that way from the onset. And I think it's...
And, you know, there's movies like The Exorcist.
Show.
We have seen in
goodness.
some media these crazy out-of-body experiences or where there's entities or, you know, we call them demons or angels or things visiting you
and
from
I actually
a different
felt like a lot
realm.
of the times that I experienced this kind of intensity in ceremony with other people, going through these things or letting these like energies through them, I think a lot of that is our own ideas.
Absolutely.
I think we go down with ideas that in order to heal or let something out, it's going to have to look this extreme way.
Right.
And I found that most of the people that had these over the top extreme kind of experiences tend to be those kind of people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's,
Or people
it's
that
like
feel
our own
such
painting
a
our
darkness
own reality.
inside of them, such an ugliness inside of them they haven't accepted, that they do go through these, like, separate it and maybe get it out in a different way. So that it doesn't have to be part of
It's
them.
who you are.
I know.
Who you are and how you deal with stuff is how it'll come out in ceremony.
Right.
Yeah. You know, when guests would come into Geist Grata, a lot of them were on the last, maybe this was their last trip they'd take. They were like, if this doesn't work, I'm going to take my
pretty
life.
desperate.
Or anger.
Just depression for 60 years.
Depression.
Like just absolute,
a lot of people, you know, we did get the kids that were like, I don't know, I was in Colombia and I heard about this thing called ayahuasca. And they come in and we're like, well, honey, welcome and good luck. Here's a helmet.
Each gets their own.
Yes. And then some people, like this gal, the story we want to share, came in with a dead stare. Just really nothing behind their eyes.
No energy.
No
energy. It seemed like if you could describe, that would be her. Like she was hunched over. She was, like just nothing behind her eyes. Very difficult time with eye contact.
Not
which
vibrating to me, anything. Like not even bad vibes or good vibes. Just no.
Barely being.
That's probably the first thing I would notice in working with a lot of people is the amount of eye contact they're able to make is a very clear indication of kind of where they're at. You know, like there was one guy who just
like
had impossibility. Can't even be seen. So she was like this, like would just very little flashes of eye contact. And she, in our sharing, you know, she didn't really know why she was there. She was young, 22 or so. She was from Australia and she had never left her home. And she had never left Australia. So the fact that she was in Ecuador was amazing. Like, I mean, she never left her city. Wow. She pretty much physically never left her home. Like she's like, I'm a homebody. I like to stay at home. I like to stay in my room. I don't like to go out to, I wanted to school at home. I wanted to work at home. I work for my family. She just never left. And she's like, I'm just afraid. Like, kind of like, I'm afraid of everything.
That's the first indication that something was lying beneath. Because we're like, so something got you here, broke through all these things about you. And we joke, but we're like, it's always the quiet ones.
I mean, a real big truth is just in general is we're energetic beings. And if we don't inhabit this body to its fullest, something else will.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what ended up happening.
That's kind of what happened. Yeah. The story is the story is funny because Heather and I had probably seen, I say, we were there about 6 months. There was maybe, I would say, 3 to 5 instances that really stood out as like very highly traumatic, you know, maybe for the group, like very, you know, like most people, because we'd get 25 or so people for each retreat. And so 3 to 5 times in 6 months, there was just like, okay, this is pretty intense. It's going to take a little bit extra work and extra time and extra people. So Heather and I have been working. She was working, like heading the entire kitchen, all the food,
days.
Huge days. I was kind of like leading the volunteers and the guiding the participants through like the conversations and the meetings and everything. So we finally had a day off and we're like, we don't have to work tonight. We're going to watch a movie.
Just like a dumb movie. We were like we want a brain turn off thing, like Hitch, Mean Girls, like
something. And we're just going to sit around and like that's all we're going to do. And so we're about 20 minutes into this movie and a woman comes up and she flings open the door and she's like, all hands on deck, all hands on deck. And we're like, and it was during an ayahuasca
She's like, you don't hear that?
Yeah.
And we turn off the movie
and we're like, what?
And we hear screaming.
Like guttural,
Which
only
this is like
otherworldly,
super far away. this
super, yeah.
Right.
Where the Maloka is compared to where we are is like very far, and you generally can only maybe hear like the faint, a
Of a
faint drumming
drum
or a
Right.
faint singing. Like
I mean, honestly, the frogs
nothing.
and the bugs and
Yeah.
everything else
The
is
frogs,
such
Much
an
louder,
orchestra, you
yeah.
can't hear
Yeah.
shit. Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
know.
if we ever heard anything during a ceremony, we're like, oh, maybe something's happening. Maybe you heard something a little bit, right? But this was
Whoa.
echoing throughout the entire valley. Like it was I said like it was an
Something's going
otherworldly
down.
sound. So
Yeah.
I stepped out and I heard it, and it just it affected my whole body. And
Strap on our boots.
yeah,
get our
we're like,
flashlights.
all right, let's go.
We're like,
I put my crystals in my
kick it.
pocket.
Yeah,
get my
yeah,
jacket
yeah.
on.
At this
and I'm
moment,
like,
we were
yeah.
like, so this is our lives. Where like one
Yeah.
second you're watching Hitch, we're like the
Right.
Duff or whatever,
yeah,
and you're like hanging out with the girlfriends and like
trying to
and
relax,
next minute you're walking down a hill to go like
investigate.
hold space
Yeah.
so that someone can go through a spiritual healing.
Yeah.
Like it
Right.
was a big
It was
moment
big.
for us.
So we get down there, and this girl, she keeps repeating her name. I'm not going to say her name, obviously, but she's repeating her first, middle, and last name, repeating her name, and in between bouts of screaming and just thrashing. So we come to find out, we come down to the volunteers who were already helping, and there was 3 of the strongest men, like young men, like one of them was like a crazy, like a bodybuilder. The other one were just like very strong young men, and they're like, it took all 3 of us, and this girl was about 80 pounds.
Yeah.
Could
Yeah.
not have been more. She was absolutely tiny. They're like, it took all 3 of us to remove her from and kind of like take her like a little bit outside of the Maloka.
And that was the first thing of like this other.
They're like, we couldn't
strength.
hold her
Like,
down.
what is
We
that?
couldn't. She was physically like, we could barely contain her. And we talked to one of them later, and he said that that her eyes were completely rolled back and her out, like he couldn't see anything but just pure white in her eyes. And he's like, her tongue was spin. I mean, it's stuff like you hear like from The
Yeah.
Exorcist, right? Like absolute madness. And Christine, who runs the center, like she actually has even said has more specific training even than the shamans on psychic healing, and like she calls it psychic surgery, and finding
Yeah,
out where energetic energies and where things are kind of like attached to the body. So it turns out this girl had something attached to her spine, and it was an energy, and it had been there for a very long time, and it was holding on like very tightly. And the reason she was asking her to repeat her name was to like ground her into herself, is to like tell me who you are and
Own herself.
Own
It's actually,
herself,
I was
yeah.
gonna say, it reminds me of when people have body dysmorphia and other issues. They do body checking, like they constantly touch their bodies.
interesting.
And so when you said that, it's something I often see when people are trying to, their higher self is trying to keep them in their bodies.
wow. And this one, I don't think this
It's
girl,
like
you could
there's
tell she
some
didn't
other
want to be in
being
her body.
that
Yeah,
is
for
trying to
sure.
take
Well,
over.
wasn't that a part of it? She had had a big trauma as a child.
Well, but she didn't know this
Right.
during the
Right,
time. During
right.
the ceremony, she had, again, like the reason she was there, she's like, I don't know. She's like, I just don't go out. I don't know. I'm scared of everything. But beyond that, like she didn't know what she was trying to heal at all. So as Christine was doing this psychic surgery, she, like helped to like remove this thing that was like really interwoven into her spine.
Which is the center of our universe. Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I saw her kind of, working on her and stuff, and eventually she settled down, but
and the 3 guys are still holding her. At
yeah,
this
completely
point.
like physically on top of her to
And she's
hold her
out of the
down.
ceremony, but
Yeah.
kind of away.
And occasionally what was like the scary part was that she would be saying her name, like say her name wasn't Jennifer, but she's saying, Jennifer Smith, Jennifer Smith, Jennifer Smith. And then it would be like, and then like another voice would come out, like there was something else. And then she'd go back to herself. So there was like a battle kind of like going on. And she ends up after a while settling down. We go through the rest of the ceremony, but it was very, that was one of the more scary, like in my body, like fear. I could be like, I'm not letting you take over, but like, this is definitely something I've never seen before. I've never heard, like, that's the thing, like the sound itself was just something different. And going between her voice and that, whatever that sound was, I'm like, this is when I know that there are other realms and other things
Absolutely.
going on in this world. I can't claim them. I'm not going to say that I can prove anything. I don't care to prove
And the
it.
power of the medicine became even more apparent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of like
It
what
did.
you could go through.
Yeah, because that energetic being wants, its ideal is to stay in her body.
Yeah.
Of course.
And it
That's
will
what
do
it was.
anything to
Planet Earth,
stay in her
baby. It's a
body.
good ride.
Yeah, I know. That's what
Yeah.
we've learned. Like all the spirits are like,
Yeah.
can I come in? Can I play? Can I be in your body? Like this gift of a body that we have to be in physical reality is like a lot of them. And that's mainly kind of what they want. They want to play with
Yeah.
us, see what's going on. Can we we get in here and the look, like I'm sure you've noticed this in Ayahuasca, the look for fear, the look for the weakness.
I was going to say, when you said, that moment you almost had fear and then moving past it, it's so important, especially as a facilitator. You can't, it's like my teacher would say, the fear has hooks. And the moment you let that fear in, it will hook. And it will.
It's like 17 seconds or something. Like there's
It's
time.
really short.
And you have to, and I've had a very similar experience to that, and in ceremony we have the medicine songs that we sing very specifically. There's tools, sacred tools, mapacho and agua florida, and things like lemon and salt and water, ground.
Sound,
yeah.
Laughter always helped clear a space for me.
Definitely. But it's like, it's really, we've been trained to be afraid of what we don't know.
Yeah.
And when we don't know what someone else is experiencing or doing, especially because when we are in ceremony, any one of us, it's like, it's a hard time because you can be having your experience and then it's like you think other people in the same room are seeing the same thing you are. But it's like we're all sitting in a room with these like 3D goggles on. What are those things?
Virtual reality.
Yeah, it's like we all sit in a room and there's like 20 of us and we all going to put on these goggles and we're all going to key into our own reality.
Yeah.
So how are we supposed to, right? And that's why you have the shaman. It's why you have the facilitators.
Right.
Yeah. I get people that are like, can I do this in the woods all by myself?
Oh my
Can I just grab a thing?
Even imagine.
No, right. Because it takes you beyond. And I myself am clairaudient and clairsentient. So there are times where I do see things, and I'm so grateful when I am sent visions for things, but for the majority of it, I feel and I hear. So I can feel what's going on in other people's bodies in ceremony, and I can hear what spirit wants. But when other people are like, I see a thing, I'm like, okay, cool. I have to listen to what they're saying,
right,
and adapt to their world. So I'm lucky. I get to see when I'm in ceremony, but other people don't.
Yeah.
It just takes over their whole reality.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So long story short of this girl is the next morning we were getting breakfast and I was kind of coming into the main area and I see someone standing by the sink. And I was like, is that
you asked me who it was.
I was like, who's that? I was like,
no.
is that?
Shut up.
Yeah, I'm like, because it was toward the end of the retreat, and I'm like, oh shoot, I should know everyone by now.
Yeah,
like
2 weeks
every once in a while,
intimate.
you'll like forget someone's name, and you're like, oh crap, I'm supposed to be leading this group, like I need to know who this is. And this person turns around and she's like, good morning, would you like some coffee? And it was Kira, and then she was like, bright, bushy-tailed, giant blue eyes. Her hair was different. Her everything.
Her shoulders are
back.
back. Her skin color
It
was
was
different.
open.
Her eyes had life.
She was tall.
Her energy was powering through in a place where there was a void.
Yes.
She was
And
cooking. She was preparing.
She was
and we're
connecting. Her eyes. She stared at you right in the eye.
She's
and
like,
we
good morning.
No, who is
And
this?
I go,
How could this be
and
the
then
same
and not
person?
only who is it, but I'm like, does she remember what the fuck just happened?
She
last night?
didn't.
She
No.
didn't.
And she didn't know how she was coming across.
Right.
We're like, Kira, you look so different. Like, everything's changed. She's like, I do? What do you mean?
Right.
What? She had come back from somewhere.
Yeah, but she
She
learned what it
reclaimed
was.
her own
It was
She
told to
did.
her.
She
like
did it well.
she doesn't remember the trauma, but she does remember it was told to her. Like she was revealed to her, and this is what sparked everything happening was in her ayahuasca ceremony. She remembered a sexual trauma when she was very young, and she remembers consciously saying and kind of making a deal and saying like, I don't want this to happen ever again, and so I will shut myself off from everyone and everything in exchange for protection.
Absolutely.
And so she asked she's like, no matter what it takes, like I can't deal with this again. So the protection, so this entity that was in her was saying like, stay home, be afraid, do these things, and like I'll protect you, like I'll live in you, but I'm gonna live through this fear. And it was like making her look like this, 100-year-old woman, and she's a young woman. And in the San Pedro ceremony, Christine told her, like, this thing, she's like, I've released it from you, but you need to acknowledge it and, like, send it away. She's like, this is something you have to do.
Yeah.
You have to say, like, thank you. Almost like it's so funny, but she's like, you need to say thank you. Like, thank you for what you have done for me, and thank you for being with me all these years. I don't need you anymore, and, like, I release you to go back.
Here's the thing with trauma that we're just now really discovering is that when things happen to us as children, we don't know what the fuck is going on in the world. We have no idea.
No
and
concept.
Especially, not to besmudge, but my parents didn't articulate shit. You know, you better be good or Santa's going to give you coal. I hope you put that tooth under the tooth fairy pillow. You know, it's
They
all
set
these
up the
fucking
rules.
weird shit, right?
Yeah.
Nobody says
Yeah.
why. Why? Because I say so. You live under my roof.
Yeah.
And so as children, the forgiveness, the gratitude and the forgiveness now as an adult is so important for ourselves because we made decisions when we didn't understand what was going on and to the best of our knowledge to keep ourselves safe.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so
yeah,
our parents would
that's
love
it.
us. It's like
Right.
you get really stoked when I follow your directions. I'll
Right.
believe it.
Yeah.
I get
And
food.
things like, oh, if I do that with that person, here's this reaction. Well, now I'm going to cut myself off from that painful thing.
Yeah.
So as a child, I'm going to take the things that I understand. This is a man. This was in this place. And I was doing or wearing this.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to create a belief system that as an adult, I'm not safe when I do this and I wear these
Right.
things in
Yeah.
this place,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
So forgiveness is so fucking big.
Yeah, because you take
it's
these things. I think when
huge.
we
You're so
become
right.
aware of the things that our parents told us and how it's affected our
Yes.
lives, of course, anger will pop up. In the
know.
face of awareness, anger is kind of the first one. You're like, oh, they told me that. I remember when I
Outrage.
realized,
Yeah.
I dismantled my Christianity. I was raised in a cult, and I could have been this, and I could have done this, and there was this anger, and that kind of fed the way I treated my parents, and it started poisoning a lot of the stuff, and it did not end. This awareness that I had that I lived in these certain ways. In fact, it started creating a new belief system that people could lie to me and that Christianity harmed
right.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just one more set of
just
beliefs.
created another one.
It's just a
I
new
know.
belief.
Yeah.
And so this, I love this term Lynn Twist uses it to say at the end of thing, like hospicing these old ideas out, and forgiveness and a peace with letting go with the thing is so important. This love is what can end these things the right way and a beautiful way to like grow into the next one. Like hate ain't gonna end
No,
these awarenesses.
it just makes
No.
more.
Yeah.
It just makes more.
It makes
Yeah.
a different one.
And there's
Yeah.
no healing with hardness.
No.
You can't like go, fuck, I gotta cut this out and remove
Like,
it.
get out,
and
get out, get
thing.
out. I don't
There
need
is
you
no-
anymore.
There's no
No.
way.
That ain't
Yeah.
And
gonna
how
do it.
beautiful to go, I'm not at odds with this entity or this energy. Thank you so much.
Thanks for what you gave
Because
me.
I thought I needed you.
I thought I needed you.
we
and maybe
needed
I
each
did.
other.
At the
Yeah,
time, maybe I
right.
did.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you for the lessons.
I know.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're nullifying all that has ever been. Like if she
Yeah.
was to go, oh, I let that energy in and that was fucked up and I'm fucked up, then it just creates more trauma on top
and
of
more
the
fear
healing.
and anger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which we
Yes.
can see with people, that have the I fucked up pattern. Like we know these people in our life. It just, like we were saying, the cycle is like, oh God, I said that wrong. I fucked up. And then because that they do fuck up. And
do.
you're
And
like, well,
they
now you
become
did
a
fuck up.
fuck up.
And then you're like,
Yeah,
ah,
you're like, well, yeah, now you have begun.
And the shame spiral.
And the
is
shame spiral and the
reinforced.
victim spiral, and
Yeah.
it keeps you in this
We all
world.
have
And if you
those,
can be
yeah.
like, I see you, I see what happened, I get it, thank
Right.
you, I'm done with that, and thank you, and goodbye, and
Yeah.
what's next, and like, boom.
Yeah.
Do you have, Kate, any stories, like a great story of healing or something that was maybe like traumatic or dramatic at the time when you were experiencing it, but you saw kind of what came out on the other side?
Well, I could share it. I could share a lot, but I'll share something of my own.
Okay.
Because I can use my own name. So it was a 2 ceremony in a row kind of weekend, and first ceremony, nothing. And I had sat a few times, so I knew it was possible, but I was also like, fuck this. This is
Yeah, the
frustrating.
natural
It's
reaction,
frustrating
right?
to sit here while everyone else is having some like a huge
Yeah.
emotional epiphany.
Totally.
So I was like, whatever. I took my medicine and I dealt with it. And then the next night, I sat down and I was halfway in, and I was just like, I just really wanted to deal with why I like to eat so much food. Like, I just wanted to deal with like why everything has to go in the mouth and to make me happy,
Yeah.
drink and food and all the stuff and smoke and so she was just like, I got this feeling of her being like, this is so vain. Like, you're just not even trying, Katie. And I finally whittled it down and I said, fine, okay, Mama, I am willing and need to obviously talk about my relationship to alcohol. And she was like, fuck yeah, here we go.
Okay.
Let's do it. Right? I could feel
that's
it.
a big one. That's a big one.
Just hit me like a brick or wall. I was just all of a sudden, I'd been fine for a ceremony and a half. And then all of a sudden the nausea and the spins. And I looked down at the blanket in my lap and it had a paisley pattern. And then they started to become like snakes, and I was like, oh God, here we go. And I start purging. And I know now, right? Purging, throwing up is usually fear, and diarrhea or
thought it was
bottom
the
purging
opposite
is. Oh, it is. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, fear it is.
Oh,
Fear
really?
from the mouth and anger from the bottom.
Wow.
Because we have a major circulatory system branch that goes through our liver and our gallbladder. And so when our fight or flight is triggered, it does a major dump. And literally, we take a dump. And so, yeah, I just took this amazing class all about it. So I start purging, vomiting into a bucket, and it's like usually I'm just vomiting like normal ugly vomit, but this was like dry heaving and like deep guttural frog kind of tones and things, and people around me expressed concern and brought me like another bucket.
Oh, wow.
You know,
Yeah.
and I was like, I couldn't even tell if I was getting it in the bucket. I was getting so high that everything felt cold and wet, and I was pretty sure I had vomited all over myself, but I gave up. And so I didn't. I was fine. But I was like, I need to go to the bathroom and I need help. And so I start trying to speak and nothing comes out. And so I start waving my hands, and one of the facilitators comes over and he leans down and he goes, "How can I help you?" And I thought, fuck me, because this guy who's supposed to be in charge is supposed to fucking know how to help me, and I don't know how to help myself.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So thank God this is just before my initiation work. So the calling was there to learn. So another woman across the room goes, she needs to ground. She needs to ground, bring her to the earth. And I said, well, first I need to go to the bathroom. So they helped me to the bathroom because I couldn't walk on my own. When I went to get up, my body was gyrating out of control. Like I had a hula hoop on, just couldn't stop it. And so my husband and this facilitator helped me get to the bathroom and sat me on the toilet. And I sat on the toilet and I stared at the picture of a dahlia on the back of the door. And it was like each of the different layers were spinning in all these different directions. And it was telling me, you're a spiritual warrior. You will not be undone. You are a spiritual warrior. You will not be undone. This too shall pass. And then I felt something move, and I felt a bowel movement. And then I'm morbidly fascinated by everything. So I cleaned myself up and then looked at the toilet paper and there's nothing. And I look in the toilet bowl and there was nothing. But the minute that I had the bowel movement, my body stopped gyrating. And I was sure that the great mother snake had been inside of my body. So at that point, my husband helped me outside to put my hands on the earth, and I felt my body explode. And it was like this slow motion into cosmos. And I think it's what we call the Shamanic Death. And the only reason I knew I was there is because I could feel my husband's hands on my body. So I could feel his hands containing me, but there was no other container. And I think I had said to him, I don't know if I can put myself back together after this. So he swaddled me in a blanket and laid me on this little futon pad. And we laid on this futon pad while I felt it's like the first couple, like the beginning is the purging, and then it's like the darkness and intensity. And usually you come back down with the epiphany and then the euphoria. And so hours and hours and hours later, I'm staring at these rafters, and it occurs to me that I am already everything I need to be happy. And like that, I was sober. Totally fine, totally back in my body, because that is what my relationship to alcohol was.
Was what?
Is that it was filling my void of happiness, that I felt empty, that I didn't have what I need, and nor did I have the capacity to be happy. And so she was showing me that I already had everything in my body, in my mind, to be utterly happy. I was enough. And I haven't touched alcohol since.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
I mean, I was like a 6-pack a day kind of person.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Irish
yeah.
Catholic.
You didn't hear her say that?
Girl. I'm
Yeah.
working with the artists and all,
Oh, of
like I could
course.
fucking drink a whole bottle of whiskey, no problem. And I was blacking out all the time.
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, it was quite a thing. Quite a
It's crazy it
thing.
even brought you through this vomiting and these tough times, stuff that we experience when we overdo it with alcohol and stuff like that.
Right? And the
Yeah.
dizziness
Yeah.
and the spins
Right.
and everything.
Heather and I talk a lot about alcohol of like this as a spirit, and like people realize that a lot when they hear the word spirits, and you're like, oh yeah, it is a
It
spirit just like
is.
everything else, right? That there's this window, and it's
so
very tiny with alcohol, right? Where it's like from buzz to like boop, 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 like when you're kind of feeling like
The lubrication,
the smoothness, maybe words come out a little easier. You
Get
can
warmer,
move,
more
your body
excited.
wants to
Across the
dance.
heart.
Yeah.
Joie
But
de
between there
vivre.
and like that desire, which is some people from 1 to 100, some people to 1, some people it's 1,000, to like keep drinking more.
Mm-hmm.
Some people can shut it off. Like Heather, you're really good at that. You're like, I had
'Cause
my
I get
2 or
sick.
whatever, and I'm
That
done.
Spirit's
right?
like, look.
Yeah.
And I think it's these
But-
things that I've kind of like been playing with is like you were saying, like spirits love being in the human body.
Yes.
It's an amazing experience.
They love
Yeah.
it.
They don't get that when they're in the plant form.
No.
So to come
And when they're in the
in,
bottle, then they want to
Right?
exercise. They want to test your
Mhm.
emotions and the range of anger, sadness.
They want
emotions,
all of
this.
and like that other woman, I
Sex,
didn't think I was
talking.
enough. So I was
Mhm.
bringing in spirit to fill something
fill
in my
something,
life. And
yeah.
it was
Yeah.
like, oh, I'll fucking fill it
I
out,
got
no
it.
problem.
Yeah.
I'll
mean, it
continue
was
to more
Destructive
more.
as fuck for me,
Yeah.
but
A lot of times. I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's better when they're drunk.
no, and
No.
people who tell themselves that are on
All the time.
they're
There's
on the
no
high
way.
of a
All
down.
the
Yeah,
time.
Yeah.
there's no
Mhm.
way. And
No.
finding that balance, I think with alcohol in particular, is so much more difficult than other
Mhm.
anything that we take into our body. Is
It's
like
so built in.
how much is too much, and then there's everyone knows there's that time with like usually it's between 2 and 3 where all of a sudden it's 11. And
Yep.
you're like,
Yeah.
when did that happen?
Right.
Like, why
Yeah.
couldn't I have at 4? Why did I? And then the person came and like, and you just like that
The
control.
witching hours
just
for a
like,
reason, where it's
Yeah.
like we get super into the nighttime shadow world.
Yeah, right.
because it
right.
likes that stuff.
Mhm.
It
You know,
loves
our,
it.
Our Christine, who owns Guy Sagrada, would talk about the spirit and how over the generations it's been muddied, it's been sullied, and that was interesting. Where
Because it's
Right.
isn't it still uses? I mean, in my San Pedro, we used alcohol at that
Absolutely,
ceremony,
yeah,
and I
absolutely.
use tinctures in my medicines
Yep.
that are alcohol based.
Mhm.
But there's prayer that goes over it. It's intentional.
completely-
There's
it's
ritual.
very
intentional.
different.
Yeah.
very
it's
different.
intentional,
Yeah.
but when it's not used with a beautiful intention, it's used to make it easier to kick someone's ass or to
Yeah.
be with somebody that doesn't feel right, then it carries a lot of this
Yeah,
drama.
to forget everything, to deal to forget. I think that's
to
most
fill,
people. Yeah,
you
to
know?
fill. Yeah.
And so it can take on a lot of those. You know, I asked the same thing with alcohol because, you know, I wasn't from a drinking family. I wouldn't, but it feels, sometimes it just, you know, when I drink, I act different when I'm drunk. I eat things I don't want to eat. And then you wake up and you beat yourself up. You feel the pain. You feel the hangover. You feel it in your body. It's not, doesn't feel right, but it's fun. And I do want to sometimes. So I'm like,
yeah, like
what
that
is
is
this
such a
thing?
weird balance.
Yes.
I know.
And the only thing I got from my experience with ayahuasca was I was like, I could tell it was Tuscany. I saw this beautiful sunny hillside on the bluest sky and these grapevines, and there's this old Italian farmer singing to his grapes, and all I got was like, do it with intention.
That's the way.
Make sure you know where this comes from. Stay in this beautiful space
Yeah.
and appreciate it. And so that's what I'm working toward. Didn't happen right away because I traveled to Southeast Asia. Maybe I wasn't always drinking with intention, but I could tell it was a little different. I couldn't forget the lesson.
Yeah.
I couldn't forget the lesson to drink with better intentions.
That's so interesting because
Yeah.
it's so like that's so like an ayahuasca experience
Yeah.
right there. It's like you get this concept, you get this idea, and then maybe you don't. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people have a dark night of the soul when they come
Honey.
back into their life because they're like, how the fuck do I take what I learned
Yeah.
and make it happen? But it's a slow, steady
Slow.
process.
You have to
It
learn.
is.
Yes.
It's about
It's
learning.
cultivating. It doesn't. There is
Yes.
no snap with ayahuasca where
No.
you all of a sudden, you know, maybe you had an entity on you, but Kira, or my friend, I will put a
Yeah.
little ping on that,
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
to learn how to be her new self when she went home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And how to walk outside. It doesn't make it.
I
any
didn't even have an
easier.
I know.
extreme of a shift like that, and my whole community is shifted. You know.
Yeah.
Thing
Oh my
around
gosh.
it.
There's
Like-
there's no going back.
And
at
that
this
brings us
point.
into
Yeah.
like integrating after
Integration,
these
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
these experiences.
It's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
tricky.
Just knowing it's not going to be this, like you tell people this and they hear it, but they don't really hear it. And even we do the same thing.
Yeah.
Where like, it's not a magic pill. It's not a magic pill. That's what you're saying with this Western medicine. It's like, just give me the thing to take and tell me the thing to do. And then and it's over, you know,
hurts
it's
too
this like,
much.
put it on the Band-Aid and it's done and then whatever. And it's so much of a different
'Cause you have to
perspective
unpack
than the slow.
everything, and when you unpack you see it all, and then you are given this decision of what to put back in your body life box.
Yeah.
And
Right.
you know,
Like if
that's
you
the tough
were
part.
fired and your house burned down and then your car was stolen and your pet died all in one day.
Who are you?
Deal with it. Like, can you really deal with it? Can you really integrate
No.
it? So you see all that shit in an ayahuasca ceremony. You can't go the next 24 hours and deal with all that stuff.
No.
No.
Yeah, you're gonna have to like find a new job, maybe move to a new place,
Mhm.
like earn enough money
Or
to get
stay
another
in the
house. It's
place
like,
and learn how to be with it.
be there,
you
rebuild
know?
there, ask for help in your
Yeah.
community.
Or
see
you got to change. A lot
what
of
you
people would be
weren't
like, well, my
before.
boyfriend or my wife just causes all these problems in my life. We're like, it ain't about
It's not
that. It's
them.
you, and it
Mhm.
sucks. But what about you? You know what I mean?
Mm.
What is your role in this? How
Yeah.
do you
Yeah.
feel?
Because we can't change others. We can't fix others. We can't
Don't
heal
we
others.
wish we could, though?
Yeah,
but you
we all do. Of
can't,
course
and
we
it's
do.
not our
Mhm.
job.
Not our
In
job.
fact, it F's things up when
Yes.
you
I
try.
know. Yeah.
Yes.
I know.
And it denies your own healing.
You
We can provide space, and
would not
that's pretty
believe.
much it. Like, that's what I'm
Mhm.
learning about healing as being a facilitator and changing the. I think that word is so big right now, and it's big in my life. It's big in a lot of people's lives. Excuse me. Is that, taking away these words like guru, shaman, leader, teacher, taking all of
Right.
those away and just being
Right.
like facilitator. Because what does that mean? It's like, I'm here. Like, I'm here to help. I can set
Yeah.
up the room.
I
I'm
can
setting up
use
the energy.
what I've experienced in my life.
Mhm.
If you need help managing your life path, but it's
Mhm.
like, no, none of us really know anything.
No.
Yeah.
None of us
I
know
mean, I try to keep
anything.
my channels as clear as I can and build enough love and energy to provide a space, a
Yes.
happy, because I feel like the best work is done in a happy, loving, intentional space. It's
Mhm.
where people, we were talking about our families and, we want to like we want our parents to like admit that they did this to us and admit, and are they going to say any of their truths if we're sitting over there with our arms crossed being
I
like,
know.
fucking say it, Dad, say it. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
having the space of like, I love you and I want to get to know you better and I just want to experience you and hear from you. Go. Which one is somebody going to open up more and,
Right,
and be able
yeah.
to work through? So creating a space where it's like, it's all good here, no judgment, laughter, fun,
Yeah.
but some of this is going to be painful. On the other side of that is the space, go, explore. That's what that's what facilitating has
Right.
become for us. We
Yes.
call
Yeah.
them happiness retreats. Ain't going to be happy all the time, but it is
It's
going to
the
be happy all
goal
the
and
time.
it's
The
the
work's going to
intention.
be
That's so
tough.
funny.
Yeah,
Everyone
I
always
know.
leaves so fucking happy.
Oh,
like
yes.
tears and
Ridiculously
pain,
happy.
and then the
Good.
endorphins
Because
afterwards
it's
are so
real.
good.
It's the most
It's
that's the best
real.
way I can describe being. Part of it is South America and the nature and the beauty and the people
Healthy
and the love
eating
and everything.
no cell phones.
But I mean, yeah, and it's
And
I mean,
any
yeah, it is a
journey
lot of
to
that
any
too.
spiritual anything is like
It's-
such
yeah.
a learning experience for ourselves in any
Mhm.
way. Yeah.
And having people witness it and they saw you through it, and it's
being able to
and
speak your truth in front of people,
Oh, the
hear truth,
vulnerability.
see other people's
Oh
pain
my
and perspectives.
gosh.
It's
So many-
all
yeah.
in one.
So many times I heard people
Mhm.
say, I've never told anyone this. Constantly people were saying
Yes.
that. And
Oh, yeah.
sometimes it
Always.
was big stuff, and sometimes it was like not big stuff.
Well,
and
everyone
you're
goes,
like,
oh, me too.
you've never told
Yeah.
anyone? Like, it's like
Right.
simple little things are
Or
like,
weird stuff like I never heard my mother say I love you.
Yeah.
I've
and you're
heard
like,
that.
how do I?
How
Oh
would
my
it be to
God.
not hear
Uh-huh.
that?
How, right.
The best medicine I got when I was down in the jungle was meeting this wonderful woman who's now like one of my best friends. And I didn't say no or tell the truth to people. I mean, I'm not like a liar per se, but I said nice things and eradicated
Mhm.
anything uncomfortable, right? So I was
Yeah.
just a people pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
And she is just aggressively honest as fuck.
Wow.
Right, she's amazing. So we ended up, some shit went down and we found each other and then we bunked together in a tambo. And I am the kind of person where I don't have the most perfect body whatsoever, but I don't like to put clothes on it, right? I just like, it's
Yeah.
sun, it's warm, it's sweating. Like, why the fuck
Yeah.
even try?
Right.
So I spent the whole time in my tambo just walking around naked or laying in my mosquito net naked. And it's another woman, so I feel fine. And she told me, she goes, holy fuck, I've never done that.
Oh.
I've never walked
Age-old
around
story,
naked. I've
for
never been
sure.
okay with my body.
Yeah.
So she went back home and now she's living in her life in Florida, right? Where
Mhm.
it's like
Right.
hot as fuck all the
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And she like messaged me. She's like, my husband wants me to thank you.
Ah!
He thanks you. My children are out of the house. It's high time we have our own space. And she's
Sure.
like, I'm just walking around, loving my body, loving her body, loving her body.
That's the lessons. It's not always the medicine. It's what you get
Oh
on
my
the journey.
God.
The
like you
other
said,
people
on the journey,
around
other people
you,
around
their
you.
experiences. Yeah. And I was like, holy
Absolutely.
fuck. Yeah.
That is a
Absolutely.
huge one. And that is, I would say
5
most
children. And she
people-
doesn't she's like never walked around naked in front of her husband.
The shame.
And with herself. yourself.
The shame. And what would that do to your love life? What would that do to what your
Never.
children think
Yes.
about
I
bodies?
know.
What are these things that's keeping our truths and that are keeping the people
Yeah.
around us that need these lessons?
And a lot of times,
too?
yeah, like when you're down there, you think you're like, okay, I need to go work on like my finances and my relationship to my dad. And then
And
you're
my
like,
career.
oh wait, I hate my body.
Right?
I
Right.
flinch
You're
when
like,
people
oh
touch
shit,
me.
like,
I,
wait.
that's what I
I
do.
judge
Yeah.
people all the
Oh,
time.
totally.
I have sex with people I don't. You know what I mean? Like, what are all these other?
Yeah,
little
what are all
things?
these other
You
ones?
You
think
show
know,
up to
and then you
learn
don't.
from spirit, and she will
Mhm.
teach you in every way, shape, and
Mhm.
form.
Oh
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Mm.
All right, guys,
love
this
it.
is coming to the
This has
end.
been
We wish we could.
awesome.
I mean,
Kate,
as
thank
we
you.
always say at the end, we're like, I could do this
talk
forever.
about this forever. And so we shall.
And
This is
so
what we
shall.
all do.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you for coming in today and opening up and sharing a lot of beautiful truths with us and laughing. And thank you for all the science. I love that.
Always.
That's
Beautiful.
always
Always.
because
Really beautiful.
there is scientific bedrocks to all the
Yeah.
stuff.
Yes.
It's part of our world.
Mhm.
Yep.
Just semi-woo, so we gotta get some science
You
in
gotta
there.
have
Tell you
this
guys how
science.
it'll work.
And we up
Yeah.
here in
Yeah.
Seattle, you know.
Yeah, and a beautiful
Yeah.
life, I think, is equal parts intellect, mystic,
Yeah.
magic, mystery,
Yeah.
solid foundations.
I
Like
say
it's all of it.
It's
Personal
all alchemy
experience.
until it's proven chemistry.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one or the other depending on where we are at the time.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
There's
that's
no
why we're walking this
separation.
path,
There is
baby.
no separation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And things that were alchemy 10 years ago are science now. 5 years ago,
Gosh.
1 year ago.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, just we're catching up. We're
Oh,
getting there.
Yeah.
That's
All
the
right,
next
we will be
episode.
back. Yeah, that's the next episode. Thanks again,
We'll
Kate,
get
and
there.
we'll see you guys soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.